from the studios in beautiful Oceanport, New Jersey. Welcome to the biggest and greatest podcast ever. I'm your host, Ray K. Right. A couple more here, George. We'll bounce into a couple of other pretty fun subjects. But what do you think? A couple more things. Just curious on your opinion on it's kind of a hot button, I guess, is border situation. I mean, what do you think of this? Is there any solution to this? I mean, there's a lot of you hear a bunch of crazy stuff going on. With this,
the border stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I support. I'm a wall supporter. I think we need a wall, and I think we've needed one for a long time. Now, what happened is, for a long time, it was thought that there was no need for a wall, especially in Arizona, because the desert was the wall. Well, they were able. The alien smugglers, the coyotes, were able to get around that by having transportation and people walking across the desert. So the what had thought was an impenetrable barrier has turned out not to be. It's porous. And so there really, in my opinion, does need to be a wall, and I do support it. I know many of your listeners will probably disagree with that, and people are entitled to disagree with it, but my opinion is it's needed, and I think that would cut down a great deal. It will not stop it entirely, but it'll cut down a great deal. The other thing on the border is that is all the people applying for asylum status and the detainees. The problem that I think the mainstream media does not recognize is that when someone applies for asylum, and a parent can apply on behalf of his or her child or children, the law requires them be detained. It requires detention. And now, in the past, a lot of times that was ignored, and they were allowed just to go into the country, and that's what led largely, or not largely, but that's what has contributed to the 11 million illegals or so that we have in the United States, because they would apply for asylum. Instead of being detained, as they were required to be by law, they were allowed to just sign a promise to appear in court. They would not show up to immigration court. They would blend in. They would do jobs. They would change their names, blah, blah, blah. And, they would just blend in with the population. So, the law actually is, if you apply for asylum, you have to be detained. And the children have to be detained, too, if the parent is applying on their behalf. That is the law. It wasn't always followed in the past.
Okay. Now, when they're detained, you hear, this children's separation thing. I mean, are they being separated? You see, I don't follow it a lot, but I see these news things. What's the story with that? I'm
not sure that I can intelligently speak about that. I imagine they have been separated. I have no reason to doubt news reports that they have been separated, but I suppose they have to. You can't.
Okay.
You want to put a 4-year-old in with, adults? I don't think so.
Oh, I got you. So they have to go in with the whole adult detention thing.
Where else are you going to put them?
Right.
If it's mandatory that the parents have to be detained and the children have to be detained, you're running a risk with of these children really being abused sexually and otherwise if they're all left together. And I mean, I don't think you can just create an apartment for a family. This family of 4 has applied for asylum, so we're going to give them their own private little residence. That just isn't practical. The facilities aren't there for it. And really, a lot of the wounds are self-inflicted by the people seeking asylum. If they don't want to be separated from their children, then don't come to the border and do it. You can apply for asylum at any embassy. So all these
okay. I didn't even know that. Right.
The people from Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, they don't have to come to the border to apply for asylum. They can go to any U.S. consulate or embassy, and they're all over the place. They're all over the place in Mexico. They're all over the place in Guatemala, Honduras. Just go there and apply for asylum, but they don't want to. They want to go to the border to try and get in the country.
So they'd rather walk the 1,000 miles and go through all that, and then Okay. I never even thought of that or heard that they could just apply right at the embassy. I mean, it seems
they can apply at the embassy. Yeah. Absolutely, but they don't want to. They want to have the cameras with the 10,000 people on the border trying to get into the United States, and meanwhile, the United States is locking them up, when they could have applied for asylum at a consulate. Now, most of them are going to be denied. That's another problem, because you have to have a well-founded fear of persecution, and most of them don't. They're economic migrants. They want to come to the United States because they're better-paying jobs. Maybe they want to avoid violence. There's a lot of violence with the Mexican cartels, but that's not a sufficient basis for granting asylum. That there's violence not attributable to the government, and they have to be singled out for persecution based on certain characteristics: religion, race, ethnicity, and almost, the cartels don't discriminate on those bases. They just kind of screw over everyone.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's a little more complex than I think people appreciate just from reading, news accounts or 20-second sound bites on news bites on TV or on radio.
Right. Okay. I want to talk a little bit
on websites.
What, George? I missed that. I interrupted you.
Or even on, even on radio, on the websites, you just don't get really the full picture.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Well, that's why we're having this podcast. We'll give the full picture here. I'd like to talk a little about history. That's one of our things we were chatting there online about. Is a lot of kids in this generation don't seem to go back too far. It seems like it's, I don't know if they're not historians or if we're raising, the new generation that doesn't go back. I'm sure there's a percentage that do, but I mean, this is the anniversary of we were chatting, Franz Ferdinand's assassination. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, started World War I.
World War I. So one assassination causes a war that kills tens of millions of people. Am I getting that right? I mean, is that how explosive things like that can be? I mean, I guess so. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and in World War I, what you had was all the alliances. So what happened is Franz Ferdinand was assassinated on this date in 1914, and then Austria declared war on Serbia. Well, Serbia had a treaty with Russia where Russia guaranteed would come to the aid of Serbia if they were, invaded. So Russia got involved in the war, and then Austria had a treaty with Germany, where Germany was obligated to come to Austria's defense if Russia ever got involved in the war. So that got Germany involved with Russia, and then you had France. Russia had a treaty with France where they would come to Russia's aid if France got into a fight, if Russia got into a fight with Germany. So France got involved in the war because of Russia declaring war on Germany. And the same with England. England, France. So it was all these alliances that were intended to prevent a world war, but actually led to a world war. I mean, really, the Germans had nothing against the Russians. That wasn't, there was no reason for a war there. The French had nothing against the Germans, but it was all these alliances that the countries had set up through treaties over the years that required the country to come to the aid of an ally who's at war. And it started with Austria invading Serbia. So it's kind of a very odd situation.
Now,
World War I, and it led to 40 million deaths. I don't know how many.
It was some crazy number. I'm always shocked when I see that number. And the U.S. it took a couple years, but then we get into it now. I guess in 1916.
We didn't get into it till 1917.
Oh, 17. That's right.
So it was. But at that point, Germany was really on its heels. But the United States entering the war was the final nail in the coffin of Germany. When we got in, all these new men coming, it was over for Germany. They really could not do anything but capitulate, and they wound up doing that. And of course, World War I just continued. It was just an absence of violence for 20 years, and it continued with World War II.
So that
World War II is just
that assassination
World War I.
might have been, that assassination continues that whole thing into the Hitler march. Adolf Hitler, right? I mean, he comes into power. Was it because of that and the way the Germans and that whole thing went down?
Well, Hitler, one of Hitler's strong things of coming into power was the Treaty of Versailles. that Germany really did get screwed over in the Treaty of Versailles, and there was the stab in the back. Of course, anti-Semitism was all a part of Hitler's program, but Hitler's rise to power certainly is attributable to World War One. I mean, that was part and parcel with his rise to power. He also had a very dynamic personality. He was able to convince the German people to follow him on this path to ruin. They just kind of followed him blindly for the most part. So, sad situation that they would do that. But, World War One directly led to World War II. There was a 20-year period of peace, but that's about it.
Right, and then and it takes another couple years. I think, what did it start, about 1936 or 30? I think it was 38, right, when that really started. I always remember the year. 39, right?
38 was Munich, where Neville Chamberlain agreed to hand over Czechoslovakia to Hitler.
That was nice of him. That was a nice move.
Peace, right? We have peace in our time. He held up the treaty. We have peace in our time. And, of course, that only lasted less than a year. That was the Munich conference. Less than a year later, Hitler is invading Poland. And then that got France and England into the war. And then they fought it alone until 41 when Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombed us at Pearl Harbor. And what was interesting about that, Ray, I'm sorry, I was a history major, so forgive me.
Well, I hear different theories about that bombing. I don't know if that's where you're going with this, but I'd like to hear what you say.
Well, where I was going is that we really, Japanese bombed us, so we went to war with Japan. But then Hitler decided to honor his treaty with Japan, that if Japan went to war with us, Germany would go to war. So Hitler declared war on the United States after Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's a lot of theories about what would have happened if Hitler hadn't done that. We might very well not have gotten involved in that and just dealt with Japan by ourselves and let England and France fight Germany. It could have been a much different war. A huge mistake by Hitler to declare war on us, because even though Japan got us into World War II, about 80% of our men, material, ships, all that kind of stuff was devoted to Hitler, devoted to the European theater of operations, and only 20% went toward Japan.
Okay, yeah, that was not his best move, Hitler. That was his fault, probably, right? I mean, the U.S. gets involved. The U.S. I always figure if the U.S. didn't get involved, Hitler might have taken over most of Europe, including England.
We might not have gotten involved. Now, it could be that we would get dragged in, but it would not have been a popular war. It would have been a very unpopular war because there was a very isolationist trend in the country at that time that we should stay out of these world wars. We should have learned our lesson from World War I and not get involved in Europe's problems. So if Hitler had not declared war on us, who knows what would have happened? It would have been much different. Maybe we would have gotten involved eventually, and a lot of people think we would, but I don't think it would have been a very spirited war that we had, with Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge and all that kind of stuff. I think it would have been a much different war, one that we weren't looking forward to fighting.
Right. Well, I'm glad
Hitler made it easy for us.
I'm glad we were in.
Yeah.
Without the U.S. in there, not that I'm being overly patriotic, but I don't know if England could have won. If we stayed on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole nother show, World War II. We're touching on this in about 5 minutes.
I'd be happy to be a guest on that show, Ray.
Well, let's have another. I want you back again. Definitely. We'll have a full show on that, and maybe absolutely. I'm going to take you up on that, George. Now I want to ask you this too about World War II, because it's another one of those questions. The war ends. We nuke Japan. We put a nuclear bomb on or atomic bomb on 2 cities and kill civilians. You hear different stories about that. Well, we should have did that. We shouldn't have did that. What's your opinion on that? Truman dropping the bomb.
I think it was justified. The estimates of our casualties. Remember, the Japanese were really fighting to the bitter end. even as late as Okinawa, they refused to surrender. And in fact, civilians were jumping off cliffs at Okinawa to avoid being captured by or taken prisoner by the Americans. They were fighting to the bitter end. And the estimates, MacArthur had planned what would have been the largest amphibious operation in history. It would have been something like 4 or 5 times as large as Normandy, to tell you the scale, because it's a big island, so you have to attack a lot. You have to attack numerous parts of it. So the invasion, it was estimated, would cost us 1 million casualties. And so people have debated whether or not Japan really would not have surrendered. I don't know, but I think it was the right decision. It was also the right decision for another reason, in that it showed Russia and Stalin that we have this weapon. So
I got you right. Yeah,
you've seen the destruction that this bomb can wreak on one city. So, and we haven't had, no one has launched a nuclear bomb since. We've had some close calls with the Cuban Missile Crisis, but no one has, and North Korea, of course, is always a threat, but no one has launched another nuclear bomb because they've seen the damage. And those bombs, of course, are minuscule compared to what today's nuclear weapons can do, that can really wipe out the earth. I mean, if there was an all-out war between us and Russia and China, I mean, the earth would just not exist.
It would be all over, right?
Killing us. I mean, it would obliterate all of civilization, and so nobody wants to do that. And it was called, the theory was MAD, mutually assured destruction. Nobody wanted to be the first to do it because they knew that retaliation would be coming.
Do you think we'll ever see that? Do you think we'll ever see that kind of thing in 100 years or in 200 years, or is that just
hard to foresee? Because you always have crazy people like the North Korean Kim Jong, whatever his name is. Iran is a threat. So I don't want to say never, especially I think if it's a rational thinking government, and it's hard to say that the Stalin government was rational thinking, but they were. He was an evil person, but he wasn't as crazy as Kim Jong and unpredictable as Kim Jong, and as unpredictable as the Iran regime. I think that those countries are the ones that pose the biggest threat to disturbing the non-nuclear weapons. And they've used biological weapons. Those regimes, those unstable regimes that don't see the big picture, are more a threat, I think, than China or Russia.
Right. Well, I want you to say, Ray, it will never happen, because that's what I say to myself, because I got to sleep.
Ray, it will never happen.
Thank you. All right.
Well, I don't think you can never say never, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
Is that a Yogi Berra line or?
Probably. He had about 1,000 of them, but I'm sure that was probably one of them. Never say never. Maybe. We'll give it to him, Now we go into Vietnam. I mean, history is everything, including sports, what I like to talk about right after this. But, history, I don't know why I think of war, with history. I see the History Channel. You see all these war shows.
Yeah, wars are really one of the defining aspects of history. I mean, they've existed for forever, and that's how we tend to define historical periods: World War I, World War II, the Civil War, Revolutionary War, the French Revolution, blah, blah, blah. So wars are a defining part of history. Vietnam, what did you want to ask about that? I was opposed to it at the time.
That's what I want to ask. What's your opinion on that? What did you think at the time?
Yeah,
I'm
older than you, so I turned 18 in 1972, and I had to register for the draft. And I was lucky in that they had a lottery. And my
that came later, right? That lottery, George, came later, right? It wasn't early on.
I think it came. Well, it came. It might have been 70 or 71.
Okay, right. But in the 60s, there was no lottery.
My year of eligibility was 72, and I drew a very high number. They were only going to take the first 25 birthdays, and I was in the 300, so I was in no danger.
You were way out. Yeah.
Yeah, I was. And anyway, the Vietnam War was winding down. We were pulling out. And the war was winding down. We were pulling out soldiers by the tons. By the time I was old enough to be drafted, but like most people in my generation, I was opposed to the war. I don't think I really understood it. In retrospect, I think that the Vietnam War was morally justifiable. I hate to defend Lyndon Johnson on that, but I think the theory of China taking over all of Southeast Asia with the domino theory was legitimate, and we had an interest in protecting our allies. And who knows what China would have done afterwards if they had free reign. If we just said, okay, take over Vietnam, take over Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, who knows what's next? Japan, Taiwan, Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, all those countries, I think, were very much at risk by Mao at that time.
Now, what was the aftermath of that war? You always get this feeling that, that was, it was a disaster the way it was, the way it was fought, or, at the end of it, nothing came out positive, or did it? I mean, after that whole thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of a waste, because we did get in and we lost 55,000 men, but it seems like our strategy was one not to lose the war as opposed to trying to win it. And, so I have some disagreements with how it was handled by President Johnson and Dulles, and I can't remember who the Secretary of Defense was at that time, but I didn't think they handled the strategy of the war very well in retrospect.
Right.
At the time, who knows?
Right.
It's much easier to judge things 50 years later than it is to make the decision at the time that we're going to proceed in this manner. Because I think that the theory was to not lose it, to just hold the line, tell China and Mao that you can't go here, and eventually we capitulated, and Vietnam became one country under communist rule.
Right, and that was that seemed to be the first war we kind of lost, right? I mean, it's like U.S. we win. That one,
yeah,
we didn't. I don't think you could say we won.
Kind of that.
Yeah,
that reminds me of that line in Stripes, right? You remember Stripes?
Yes, yeah. Bill Murray.
The Bill Murray.
Sure, that's one
Bill
of my
Murray
favorite
movie.
movies. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we're the part where he's trying to get them. We are 11-1, and the one being Vietnam. Come on, we are 11-1. We're the United States. We're dog face. We are blah blah blah. So I don't know if it was really a loss. Probably more of a draw. We kind of saved face a little bit, but it certainly was not a victory. It clearly is not a victory for the United States. Whether it's a loss, I don't know.
Well, I had an author that was on last week, and I never thought of it this way. But do you know how many Vietnam people were died, George? Do you have an idea?
Oh, I think it was substantially more than our 55,000. It might have been close to 500,000. Am I in the ballpark?
Well, according to the author, I didn't triple check it, but it was 2.5 million. That's including everybody.
Oh, that many?
That includes everybody. The civilians that died, even though they might have said it was enemy combatants, but it was 2.5 million.
Well, I guess that makes sense, because the war was fought on Vietnam land, and there's always going to be collateral damage with the bombings, and especially the napalm, and so that makes sense. Just like in World War II, do you know how many Soviets were killed in World War II? That's basically where World War II was fought.
Was it 11 million? Was it 11 million?
25 million.
25
million.
Whoa.
25 million. Now, some of those were by Stalin. He killed a certain number of his own people. But, they suffered 25 million deaths in World War II. The whole World War II was fought in Russia. And so obviously, civilians and others were going to be killed. And it was a nasty war between Germany and Russia. They hated each other. They killed civilians. They committed all sorts of atrocities. So, the 2.5 million I was off by quite a bit, but that does make sense.
Well,
I have no reason to dispute that figure.
What my author Greg was saying was that Johnson was trying to justify it like almost like like we're 11-1 like Murray, like it was like we're winning $2.5 million to 55,000, that kind of thing. I mean it's kind of
right.
crazy, but I mean casualty wise,
obviously the country suffered horribly. Vietnam suffered horribly. South Vietnam, North Vietnam, they suffered horribly. Battle casualties, civilians. There's always a lot of collateral damage in modern war.
Right.
That wasn't always the case. Earlier wars, civilians were pretty much immune, but wars since World War I, a lot of civilian casualties.
And I heard that phrase, what do they call it, shock. I can't remember. When someone comes back from war and they have some kind of shock syndrome. What's that called? When they're I can't remember.
Shell
shock. Yeah,
so,
I heard that was invented in World War I, because before that, wars weren't fought that way. Now you got like bombs and mines, and people were coming back shell shocked, like for the first time.
Soldiers being shell shocked in World War I and even World War II was very, very common, and it just had never really existed before that, because the nature of warfare changed in World War I. And although the generals didn't realize it, so the generals had fought World War I based on how they fought wars in the 1800s, which is you charge, okay? But you can't charge across when machine guns are on the other side. You're just going to, and that's why, in some battles there were 300,000 casualties in like one day. The Battle of Verdun, the Somme, numbers that are just staggering, 300,000, and of course they have the trench warfare, so they try and gain a little ground, and then they would counterattack, and it just led to carnage on the battlefield and the battlefields in World War I. Unbelievable numbers of people killed.
And then, you know what? Maybe we'll have you back. We'll talk about World War II. I wanted to get into the two Iraq wars. The one of them, I guess, is kind of continuing a little bit, and the Afghanistan, thing.
Okay.
We're talking about a lot of stuff. Maybe we'll save some of that for the next time. I want to talk about kind of fun stuff. I want to talk about some music. That's part of my subject matter here with you. 60s and 70s. Was that the best music ever?
Say it again?
The 1960s and 70s music, was that the best music ever made? Pop music?
In my opinion, it is. It blows away, especially the 60s. Very creative. You have the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who. Just blows away anything else that you've ever seen in music. 70s started to decline a little bit, but it's still better than, the 80s. And then today's music, I have a 17-year-old daughter who just loves all these hip-hop tunes, and we always have a battle when we're in the car as to what station to put on. But the quality of music, it's not even music today. I mean, there are some good singers. Ed Sheeran is very good. I like him, but it's not deep. There's no depth. Once you get past Ed Sheeran and some of these other singers, there's not much there. And the hip hop I hate. It's annoying and it's vulgar. I mean, have you ever heard the song Bodak Yellow?
My son's 14, and his kids, were playing. I told him to turn it down outside by the pool, and it was yeah. I was like, "What's this?" Yeah.
It's absolutely disgusting. And then Post Malone is another one that's disgusting. And I just and of course, kids today or youngsters, teenagers, younger people can criticize me because I'm an old. I'm an old timer, just like I did when I was 17, 18. I didn't like my father's music or my mother's music, which was Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey and all these big bands. I thought that music was crap. So every generation has that. But, in my opinion, 60s and 70s, far and away the most creative period in rock music and pop music.
Who was your favorite?
There's so many great songs.
Who was your favorite groups back then? Like who were the top three?
The Beatles were. Mm-hmm. The Beatles were number one. I also was a big fan of the Who In fact, I don't think I own it on MP3, but Tommy was the one album that I owned in every medium. I had it vinyl. I had it as an 8-track. That's how old I am. I had it on.
Yeah, I remember those things.
I had it as an 8-track. I had it as a cassette. I had it as a CD. Am I missing anything? Vinyl, 8-track, cassette, CD.
78s?
What's that?
Where were they? 78s? I guess those were the 50s, though. That there wasn't like a
78. No, it's a 33. It was a 33.
33.
But, so that's one album that I've owned in every medium, except now for MP3. I guess I could download it and get it in MP3 format. But the Beatles were number one. The Who were great. I saw them in concert in Springfield, Massachusetts. I went to a lot of concerts in my younger days at Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum. I saw Elton John and Led Zeppelin there. Went to a ton of concerts in my younger days.
It seems like at those concerts, that's sort of like how life should be. You know, whenever I go to one of those, I mean, everything is just so great. And you're thinking, man, this is too bad the world wasn't like this is how it is all the time. You know, I know it can't be, but, you know, it's one of those few times that, you know.
My most recent concert, and in November, I went to see Fleetwood Mac in Phoenix, and that was terrific. And one thing that was noticeably absent, Ray, is that there was no smell whatsoever of marijuana.
Oh, okay.
And it's because, you know, it's all people my age there, and maybe a little bit younger and some older. But the first concert I ever been to in my whole life where there was not a hint, an aroma, a whiff of marijuana smoke in the air.
Wow. Okay. Because everybody from that era is now older now, I guess, and they don't smoke.
Everybody is now older, and it just, you know, they'd rather drink wine than get high on grass.
Well, that's the great thing about those kind of groups, because they all come back. I never knew back in those days that's how it would turn out. Like in 40 years, they keep playing these songs, and it's actually still great, you know, because of the nostalgia. You know, I mean, I saw McCartney, you know, later, you know, 10 years ago.
McCartney's having a tour. The Rolling Stones are on tour. I saw the Rolling Stones twice at Madison Square Garden in the early 70s. One time, the opening act was Stevie Wonder.
Oh,
Stevie Wonder.
Before he was Stevie Wonder, right? I was probably.
Well, no, he was well known.
Oh, okay.
He had a lot of hits before then, but he was primarily known to the black audience. And he credits the Rolling Stones allowing him to be the opening act with allowing him to appeal to mainstream people, and it did. And after that, you know, he had songs in the Key of Life and albums like that appealed to everybody, just not those interested in rhythm and blues or soul music, or you know, especially the black audience. For lack of a better phrase, he appealed to everybody, and he credits the Rolling Stones with that. So I saw them twice there. Led Zeppelin, Grand Funk Railroad was my first concert.
Oh wow, Locomotion, right? Wasn't that their big hit? Yeah.
Although this was before Locomotion, this was at the Yale Bowl. The summer between my junior and senior year, as I was heading into my senior year in high school in Yale. So that was my first concert, and been to a million of them, although, you know, very few these days. Fleetwood Mac, before that, I saw Billy Joel about 5 years before, probably about 2010 or so.
Well, you know, you feel like you're like 17 again, right? When you go and you see you see Fleetwood Mac, like I guess it brings you back to like that youth, you know.
It felt great going to that Fleetwood Mac concert. I keep looking now for other concerts of groups that, you know, that I liked back in the 60s and 70s. I'd love to go see Paul McCartney, but the tickets, I'm sure, are outrageously priced. Rolling Stones, you're not going to get a ticket. I'm not going to get a ticket to that at any reasonable price. But, you know, some other groups that I liked in the 60s and 70s, if they come around, I'd love to see them.
Do you like Springsteen?
You know,
you like a couple songs like that? You might like a couple songs like On the Run, that's like that kind of thing? Mm-hmm.
I generally am not a big fan of Springsteen. I just don't really get the blue collar New Jersey kind of themes that he likes to explore in his music.
Yeah.
There are, a lot of his songs are great. Born to Run, Dancing in the Dark, Pink Cadillac is a great song. 11th Avenue Freeze Out.
10th Avenue.
Twice in concert.
Yeah.
What is it?
10th Avenue Freeze Out. You were close. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw him twice in concert. Once early in his career at Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, and then again in the 90s, maybe the late 90s in Hartford. And he puts on a magnificent show, but I'm not the biggest Springsteen fan in the world.
What do you think of these? Because I saw Bruce like 2004 or something. I didn't like that I was captive and he was a little political, and me and my wife were like, nah, I don't like that. I'm coming out here. I want to see the music. I don't want, I'm a captive audience and you're giving me this political type stuff. What do you think of that?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think these artists are making the big mistakes by diving into politics as much as they are. Bruce is very, very outspoken. Bono of U2 is, Cher, Barbra Streisand. I think they're making the mistake and they're alienating a good portion of their audience. I don't like it. I think that they're making a mistake, but it's a free country. They can do what they want.
Right, especially at the concert itself. I don't like that aspect. That I'm paying money, I'm seeing you play. Now you're telling me this stuff. It's like, come on, play the music.
It's a captive audience, and they're preaching to you about
It's like a cheap shot or something. It's like a cheapy thing.
Yeah,
it's like you got me here now.
I don't like it at all, and especially in concerts. I think there's a difference between what they do privately and in concerts. In concerts, I really think there should be no place at all for it. They should just leave politics out of it and just do the music. And Fleetwood Mac did that. There was no politics at all that I could detect. No slide, no comments, or no digs at anyone. But in concerts, hey, talk about the music.
Right.
Do your music. Do your thing.
Sing me a song. Right. Give me the music.
Play the music.
Yep. Yeah. All right, sports. Let's talk a little sports, and then I'm going to wrap up, George. I have a hit and miss, I call it, which my word association. That's how I wrap my podcast up. So, you ready for that a little bit later? But let's talk a little sports.
Yeah, let's talk sports.
Let's talk sports. We're talking baseball. There's that song. I love the sports songs. I guess maybe we'll talk baseball. What do you think of the season? You're a Mets fan? How did that happen? I'm a Yankee fan. I was amazed by these Mets fans. I always figured their father was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, then they like the Mets because they're anti-Yankees, and then their sons become Mets fans. How'd you become a Met fan?
Well, I think it's I'm kind of a contrarian, and when I first started getting involved in baseball, which was when the Yankees were good in the early '60s, and the Mets had just become an expansion team, and they were horrible. I just didn't like, my friends were all Yankee fans, and I just took a contrarian attitude and started pulling for the underdog, the Mets. And so I've been a Mets fan, and I have to admit I'm more of a fair-weather fan these days.
Well, it's hard to really get into the sport when your team's not good. Is that? I can remember I had a couple bad lean Yankee years the last 10 years. It wasn't fun.
It's much easier being a Yankee fan or a Red Sox fan than it is being a Mets fan, because we've won 2 World Championships. We've been to 4 World Series total, and of course you guys have 27, 28, I don't know how many it is. But so I grew up as a Mets fan, went to a lot of Mets games. My first baseball games were Mets games. We also started going to Yankee games. I followed them really pretty religiously up through the 80s. When they started to decline in 89 or so. 86 was great, of course. And then the 90s were just dreadful for the Mets. They had horrible teams, horrible management. I was even a Mets fan during the 70s when Shea Stadium was known as Grant's Tomb after they traded Tom Seaver. And then because of my radio career, I moved around a lot. I lived in Milwaukee, and I became a Brewers fan and a Packers fan. You're a Packers fan,
big time,
right?
Yep, big time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's one team that I grew up as a Jets fan because of Joe Namath at the time, and the Giants were horrible. So I still kind of rooted for the Jets, even though they weren't that good. Then when I moved to Wisconsin, I became immediately a Packers fan, and I have been ever since. Although, I liked it when the Giants beat the Patriots in those 2 Super Bowls, and during the Parcells years when they won the 2 Super Bowls with Phil Simms and then Hostetler as the quarterback. So the Packers have been a kind of a constant with me, with the Giants kind of a distant second. Baseball, I follow whatever, it's between 3 teams, the Mets, the Brewers, and the Arizona Diamondbacks. I live in Tucson now. So whichever team is doing better, right now it's the Brewers. The Mets, they made a lot of good moves that I thought in the offseason to improve their bullpen, but their bullpen is still a disaster. They just blow so many games.
We always, we always chat on Facebook. It's fun. We take contrarian views, even though I think we agree on a lot of stuff. But what do you think on I always get a lot of feedback on my pushback on my Yankees. I always say this guy should be in the Hall of Fame. This guy should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have. What do you think of Pete?
We have a good time. We have a good time doing that, Ray. Yeah. And a lot of times I just play devil's advocate.
Oh, I know.
On sports.
I know.
And because you're a big Thurman Munson fan.
I am.
And you think he should be in the Hall of Fame, and I just play devil's advocate to see how well you can support your argument. I like the guy a lot. I don't know if he,
now that we're talking, I got the argument, and I just seems to me so strong. And all my most of my friends are Mets fans for some reason. That I don't get.
Are they really?
Yeah, like my best friends are all Mets fans, and I'm the Yankee fan, and they think I'm a little bit of a nut, thinking Thurman should be in. But he's all right. You got Fisk, who was great, but out of the 70s, I really think Munson was the better catcher because Fisk was injured a lot, and Munson won the MVP, won the World Series. He had some pretty good, metal behind him. Fisk was, maybe equal, but I still think. I don't know. Thurman was such the heart and soul of that team, and everyone loved him. You don't hear many pitchers that seem to really love Fisk. You were all the pitchers that Munson caught for. I mean, it's really an admirable type thing. They really loved the guy, so there must have been something there.
Well, I agree with you, and I think he's a borderline case for the Hall of Fame. Though I really hope that he, especially these days where Harold Bain's getting in, in my opinion, I'm hoping that Munson makes it eventually. His career was cut short, obviously, because of his death in the airplane accident. And I think I mentioned this on Facebook the other day, that in my opinion, he was the straw.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I love seeing that.
78, not Jackson. It was Munson. Munson held that team together. Jackson was disruptive. He's getting in fights with Billy Martin. He's, a candy bar thing. He's disrupting it. Munson was the glue that held that team together. And Jackson gets way more credit for that. He had 3 home runs in the series. But overall, in my opinion, those great years that the Yankees had were Munson.
And Munson also
76.
76 was great.
They made it. They didn't win the World. I'm sorry for interrupting, Ray. They didn't win the World Championship, but they made it to the World Series. Lost to the Reds in =76 without Jackson. With Jackson, 77, 78, they obviously won, but it was still Munson driving that team. Medals too. They had Mickey Rivers and other important people, Guidry, but Munson stood out above the others, in my opinion.
And you know who loved Munson, George, more than anyone and admired him, which really made me realize how great this guy must have been. And he was the kind of a controversial, the owner, George Steinbrenner. Thinking if Steinbrenner loves that guy, there must be something big that guy has, something heart or something. Because I know Steinbrenner really admired Munson, big time.
Right.
And. That to me, that's a pretty big statement. I don't think George Steinbrenner loved too many people, as a player. He was pretty tough,
right.
He's a tough guy, What do you think of Pete Rose?
Munson
go there.
Was the perfect Steinbrenner guy. He played hard every time. He had a hard-nosed attitude. He didn't take shit from anybody. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you edit that out?
No, you could say it. You could say anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Munson was not afraid of anybody. He intimidated people. It wasn't the other way around. and that's the kind of guy that I appreciate. He you know what he reminds me of, and not as far as catching ability or anything, but the same kind of demeanor that he had was Gorman Thomas of the Brewers.
Okay. Wow.
You know, they had the same kind of look to them, the same kind of intimidation. Gorman Thomas, you know, is nowhere near being as good overall as Thurman Munson, but they had that same kind of blue-collar attitude. They weren't afraid to bang into walls. Gorman Thomas was always banging into walls in center field. He played with his heart. He didn't have the most talent of anyone, but he gave it everything he had. And I always loved Gorman Thomas during his Brewer years in the early 80s. Late 70s, early 80s.
I remember him. He had that big, thick mustache, right? Sort of like Thurman.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right.
Yeah. Same, like that husky build, you know, same kind of thing,
build, right?
Yeah. Let me get it in. Just, you know, it's kind of like beating a dead horse. But what do you think of Pete Rose? You think he has a shot at the Hall of Fame? You think 30 years has gone by? I see these things on Facebook. 30 years. Let's put him in now. He served his time. What do you think of that?
Well, my opinion has always been no, and I've consistently held that opinion. You know, it could change depending on what baseball does with gambling. There are somebody just got the green light. I think it was the Cubs got the green light from baseball to explore putting betting kiosks in Wrigley Field. I think it's the Cubs.
Wow.
Right. So you know,
I don't like that.
And I think it was Phil Mushnick in the New York Post who wrote about that baseball is selling itself out and is, you know, they're just looking at the money and they don't realize how detrimental that can be to the game. Now, it hasn't been approved, and maybe, you know, as they think about it more, it won't be. I guess if gambling is legalized, I probably, you know, betting on baseball games is legalized and you have kiosks in the stadiums, I probably would drop my objection to Rose. But, you know, right now he violated the cardinal rule in baseball: do not bet on baseball. I mean, that was the rule ever since 1919 or 1920, whenever it was implemented. And Landis banned the Chicago Black Sox from playing. That was a cardinal rule. I think it's posted in every single clubhouse not to gamble. And so he violated that. And then he continually lied and minimized what he was doing. And he wound up getting convicted of, you know, like tax evasion or something.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the underage girls, right? There's like 2 years, like 16-year-old girls. It was really 14. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, that's like, you know, there's so much you forgot about that even, you know? Yeah. You know? Plus he's an arrogant dude.
He'd be in the Hall of Fame. He obviously was a great player. But if it wasn't for especially the gambling, then let him in. Maybe if gambling someday is legalized, I could see him going in, because he would look hypocritical to keep Pete out while you're encouraging people to bet on games. Although it is different, you know, completely different when players bet on games, because they have inside knowledge. They could toss the game if they want to. They could whatever. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Pete. I thought he was kind of a dirty player. I'm still upset with him for the collision at second base with Harrelson, and the Fossey takeout that looked more like Dick Butkus taking out a running back.
Right, except Harrison weighed 155 pounds, so, you know.
Yeah, Pete always got on my nerves, and he still does today.
It's funny, my friends are Mets fans, and a lot of them think Pete should get in, and I always have these arguments with them whenever we go out. And then, he was a manager, he wasn't a player, so he should be in as a player. And I'm thinking, and maybe, what do you think of this, George, is how do you know he didn't bet as a player? How does this guy have any credibility? He was such a degenerate gambler. How do you know he didn't bet as a player, like throughout this, maybe the early 80s?
I totally agree.
Yeah, right.
I totally agree. He has no credibility, so his denials that he didn't do it, in my opinion, are not worth anything. I think how, gambling is an addiction, and it's not something you could just turn off and on. And also the other thing is, he placed these bets with bookies? How easy would it be for him to throw a game in order to pay off a gambling debt to a bookie that he owes? It, you know, a gambling debt's a bookie that he owes. And, also the other thing is, how easy would it be for him to throw a game in order to pay off a gambling debt to a bookie that he owes? It, you know, a gambling debt's a bookie that he owes. horrible situation. And
easy to do as a manager, I would think, right? I mean,
yeah,
you're making the moves.
You pull a pitcher, you put in somebody else, and all the moves he made, even when he supposedly always bet on the Reds to win, but on days he did not bet on the Reds. Okay, wouldn't that be a signal to the other bookies and gamblers that knew about Pete's gambling issues, not to bet on the Reds that day, that they're going to lose? If Pete's not betting on them, you don't want to place your money on the Reds that day.
Right, and that had to
betting
happen.
on them.
Right.
And,
why isn't the manager betting on him this game? I mean, okay, let's bet.
Yeah, the manager bets on him to win in this game, but not in this one. He knows something. The pitcher isn't strong. Somebody's injured. Things that don't show up in the newspapers or are widely publicized. A minor injury here and there where the person's not 100%. Those tend not to get publicized, but the manager knows about them.
And the bookies are looking for any edge they can get because it's so hard to beat the system, even though a very small percentage do. Because I did a little research and I know someone that does beat the system. Do you know, George, they just look to make 1%. If I bet $10,000 today, I'm making 1% on that. I can make 1% on every day I bet. That's all they want to make. And they need all that information to make 1%, which is enough because if you can make 1% on everything, how much would you put on some? Now,
it scales in your favor. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I would definitely agree that had to happen. With Rose.
So it
corrupts the game so much more. I mean,
it really does, and I hope baseball does not follow through on its on putting kiosks in stadiums and allowing people to bet. Can you imagine the fans too? If they bet on the Mets, or who would bet on the Mets? I don't know, but bet on.
Well, you might get 4 runs. You got that advantage because you got that thing. Mets getting 4.
Yeah, I mean, and then all of a sudden Diaz blows the save, and they lose by a run.
It could be ugly. It could be ugly. Yeah,
it really could be ugly.
Plus, you're dealing with addiction, like gambling addiction. That's like maybe we'll tackle that on the other show. That's a whole other thing. I know there are people that get addicted and lose all their money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's no limits.
Yeah, it's like any other addiction, and you have to stay away from it.
Yeah. If they put kiosks in all the stadiums, how much I love baseball, George. You see my post. That may not be my favorite sport anymore. I mean, if they do that would be a bummer for me if they do that. I hope they don't.
Double check me on that, Ray.
Okay.
It was the Cubs. I'm not 100% positive, but I think I read it in Phil Mushnick's column in the New York Post.
Okay, but it was some team, but you're just not sure it was the Cubs, but it was some team, or we'll check it.
Some team kind of experimenting with that, with kind of implicit approval from Major League Baseball, Manfred, and double check on it. I'm not 100% positive.
Basketball. What do you think about the game now? It seems like they're shooting a lot of threes. There's no back door. There's no more like 10-foot jump shots. It seems. What do you think about the game now? Is it as exciting as it was in the 70s, 80s, maybe the peak of the 90s with Jordan?
Well, it's kind of the same situation with the Mets. I grew up as a Knicks fan, and of course, when I was growing up in high school, it was the glory days. We had Red Holtzman winning 2 championships, Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe.
That was a great team.
And then, of course, they DeBusschere, Dick Barnett.
DeBusschere was my Thurman Munson. He was my Munson. I mean, I was a Celtic fan back then. I was a Havlicek fan, and I missed the Russell years, but they had the greatest rivalry, the Knicks Celtics back then, like 72, 73. Yeah. And I always thought DeBusschere was like, he didn't have the stats, but he was the heart and soul of that team. Once he came to the Knicks, to me, it was a whole different deal.
I agree. And that completely turned around the team, and they won 2 championships when whoever the general manager was traded for DeBusschere, sent Bellamy to the Pistons, and they got DeBusschere, and then that allowed them to move Willis Reed from power forward, where he was really too slow, to the center position. And but you think about it, DeBusschere was like 6'6", maybe 200 pounds, and he was a power forward. He would have a hard time making the NBA today as a shooting guard because he probably would not be quick enough. That's how much the game has changed over, the past 40, 50 years. The athletes are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. And that's true for pretty much every sport, football certainly. But basketball, you would never see, Magic was a 6'9" point guard. You never saw that before. And now you see Kevin Durant, the 6'9" small forward. That was never done before. I like the NBA. I do follow it, but mostly at playoff times. I do go to see an occasional Suns game up in Phoenix. You could get the tickets very, very cheap because they're pretty bad. And I do like the NBA more during playoff time because the intensity level ups. The same with the NHL. Playoff time is much better than the regular season. And you're right as far as it being the threes. And I just read, I think they're pushing back for next season the 3-point line by about a foot.
Oh, really? Okay. I always talk about that they should bring it back a little bit because they're shooting like foul shots now.
In all honesty, I can't recall if it's the NBA or college that's doing it, but one of the two is pushing it back, and not on the sidelines, but toward the arc, going back about a foot. I think it's the NBA. Now, the 3-point line, the 3-point game, I thought was great addition, started with the ABA, because it really opened up things. Before the three-pointer, before the threat of the three-pointer, the game, everything collapsed on the paint, because why take a 25-foot shot for 2 points when you can get, a 10-foot shot for 2 points.
Right.
So it opened it up, and it allowed, because up until, Cousy and Robertson were the only non-centers to win the MVP, I think until maybe Julius Erving in 1980 won it. And then, of course, you had the run with smaller players, non-centers winning it. And it was almost rare when a center would win the MVP, like Hakeem Olajuwon in the mid-'90s. O'Neal, of course, won a few. Shaq won a few. But it opened it. Jordan won 1 million MVP awards. Johnson, Bird, James won a lot of them. So it opened it up for smaller players. And that's a good thing. But it is becoming, a 3-point game, and it doesn't have the same kind of, I'm not sure what the right word is, but you used to have to try and get your shots. You used to have to pass the ball around, look for the open man, look for a weakness in defense, and then take your shot. Where today, you just run down the court and make a three. And so many of them are so good at shooting 3-pointers, they're like automatic.
It's amazing how much better they got. Right.
Yeah, Steph Curry is, although you think about it, if they had 3-point line when before the merger, what kind of numbers Maravich would have put up, or Jerry West, or Oscar Robertson? Those guys were great outside shooters.
Right.
If they had a 3-point line back then, they'd have been easily in the 30s. If not even maybe 40s, some of those guys.
Who's your top 3 players or top 5 players, NBA players ever?
I'm sorry, say that again. Top 5
your
players?
Top 5 players, yeah.
Current or all time?
All time.
Well, you got to go with Wilt, I think, and Kareem. I would put Johnson, Magic, Bird, and probably my 5th would be. Did I mention Jordan?
No, I'm waiting for him.
Then it has to be Jordan then. And then I guess on the 6th, actually he probably would be number 1. But Wilt, Jabbar, Johnson, Chamberlain, and Jordan, that would be it. James looking on the outside, and a lot of others very close. Karl Malone, Isaiah Thomas.
Now, what about my argument? And he's not mentioned like he wasn't in your top 5, but I was having him number 1, all just because he was a winner and he won 11 out of 13 championships with the Celtics. Like, I'm a little biased with the Yankees, and people say I'm that way for my Celtics. Because I was a huge Bird fan back in the day. What do you think of Russell?
You have Bill Russell number 1.
You know what? I'm thinking maybe Jordan. I might have changed my mind a little with Jordan. Chamberlain, Kareem was that unstoppable. That sky hook was just unbelievable. Russell didn't look pretty. But 11 out of 13.
A strong argument can certainly be made for Russell as being the greatest of all time. he's certainly in the conversation for the greatest of all time. I guess my thinking on that is that with his size, I don't think he would do that well in today's NBA. He would not be dominant. Now, maybe that's unfair for him, just as it would be unfair to, say that, Babe Ruth would not be able to hit a Syndergaard fastball with that, 50-ounce bat that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to judge him by the era that they were in, and he was certainly the dominant player in his era. And, he did it with championships. He battled Chamberlain, the best center, or the second best center, in my opinion, of all time. They had some monstrous, epic battles, and Bill Russell usually prevailed.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a story which was something it was so fascinating. How the defense could win the championship. There was a breakaway layup, and I saw it on YouTube because I wanted to see it. I think it was West. It was some huge championship game, and he was almost like a half-court distance away, and Russell sprints from the other foul line, and somehow he leaps up and blocks West's layup, like from some crazy thing,
really?
and wins the game on that play, So I'm thinking, if a guy could...
If you find the link to that, send it to me.
Yeah, I checked it out, and I got to get that game, and it was like, holy smokes. I know Jordan wouldn't be able to do that, And I'm thinking maybe there is something to this defense, of a guy that could,
Well, if you recall, a couple of years ago, I think when he was with the Cavaliers, James did that thing. James did that.
Yeah, I remember that. Right.
I can't remember who the player was, but he ran across court and blocked the shot, which wound up winning the game for them. That was a magnificent play. Not to take anything away from James. He's a great player. He's in the conversation too.
Yep.
But that one stands out because normally you think of James as being an offensive force, but he showed his hustle and defense on that play.
I want to talk one thing about college, and then I want to get into my hit and miss. I'm a basketball fiend, so I used to have these with my friends. We literally could talk all day on this stuff, and it's just, you kind of keep going, and it's fun. Fun as anything. What do you think about the college players? You think they should be paid or not? You think they should stay amateurs, even though they really are paid? What do you think of that whole argument?
I think it's heading. I think it's going to head that way. I don't like the idea of paying them, but I think it's going to be heading that way. Or if they don't pay them, at least they'll be allowed to sign shoe contracts or something. The NCAA has. They have their issues because they're really just interested in making money and not necessarily protecting the student athletes. And I think college basketball players getting paid is, if not by the school, allowing them to sign shoe contracts or do endorsements is coming. It's going to be coming in the next few years.
Are you okay with them leaving after 1 year? I know it's never going to be like John Wooden and Bill Walton again.
Yeah, I never liked the one and done. Duke obviously has had success with it. Kentucky has had success with the one and dones, but there's no continuity from year to year if you're a basketball fan. Arizona is another one and done school here in Tucson, and there's no continuity. You have basically a whole group of new players, new starters every year. I don't think that's good for the game, and you can see it. There's a lot of sloppiness because they're not used to playing together, especially early in the season. Very, very sloppy college basketball because you got 5 freshmen on the court who really have never played together.
Right. It's still a heck of a fun game to watch. I kind of prefer it over the NBA now because of the back door and they play it like I guess Dr. Naismith wanted it.
I do too, and you also see schools like Villanova winning. My school, Wisconsin, went to the finals in 2015. Gonzaga going to the finals. You have it's not as it's also good. I think the college basketball is that you have more competition. I mean, you had Virginia losing, for Christ's sakes, in the first round 2 years ago, and then this year, they win the championship. So there's always the possibility of upsets, and they always happen in college basketball during the tournament. And I do like college basketball much more than the NBA. Although I think the one and done has diminished the game.
The NBA almost now seems. I used to be able to relate to it because I almost felt like I could almost play with. I mean, it almost like you could relate to it. Now I see these players. I'm thinking I can't relate to this. They're almost too good when I watch it. It's just like
Right.
It's a strange feeling. It's like sometimes I like in baseball to watch college or like AA where they make errors. I mean, it's just. But in the NBA, they're just the 6'10" guys dribbling or dunking or hitting these threes. It's like. It's almost too easy, but that's me. It's just kind of a weird thing here. I used to like the old Bird days, and you just felt you could relate to the guy. But anyway,
so did I. I thought those were the best days in basketball. The '80s, you had Bird, Johnson, Jordan, all at the same time. It was a great era for basketball. The Celtics-Lakers rivalry. Unfortunately, the Knicks were not really in the conversation during those years.
They were bad years for the Knicks. Actually, they were pretty good in '84, '85. They had Bernard Sky BB Bernard King.
They had Bernard King.
Yeah. They had Bernard King in '84.
King?
Yeah.
Did they have Bernard King then?
Yeah, they did. Yep.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah.
So they had some, I guess, okay teams.
Well,
in the 80s, but then
Ewing came in.
There was a drought until it got the Ewing.
Yeah, and then, until the '90s. But I always say that '86 team was the best team I ever saw. The Celtics. That was a fun team.
I think Walton was on that team.
Yeah, he was a 6 man. Yeah, it was fun. Him and Bird. There was passing and
6 man of the year. That's right.
Yeah, a lot of fun too. That was the Jordan years were great. I had front row behind. I saw Jordan play about 3 times. He came in our seats once. He was something to sound. Did you ever see him play in person, Jordan?
What's that again?
Have you ever seen Michael Jordan play in person, George?
Yes. Yeah. One of my radio jobs that I was really fortunate was I covered the Bucks for my radio station, and so I got a chance to see Michael play several times when I was covering the Bucks for my radio station. And it's even more amazing when you're at court level because they gave us a seat right at the court, and seeing these players, all of them, is just amazing when you're up close. You just don't appreciate it as much when you're watching it on TV. But these are really special athletes, and Michael Jordan being the most special of them all. So I did have a chance to see Michael Jordan play in person. Bird, Johnson as well during the early '80s.
He was the most charismatic, almost person I've ever. I remember me and my wife, we couldn't take our eyes off him. Even when he went on the bench, he was like 10 feet away from us. We were just kind of staring at him.
Yeah.
It was just like he had some kind of, and then it was like you felt like you were in another world when he was playing. You just couldn't stop looking. He looked like he was playing pro against high school players. It was like that much better than everybody. I'm like, this is like crazy.
Great player.
Yeah. It was fun. I'm glad I was able to do it, and glad you were able to see it too. Let's do a little hit and miss, George. You ready for a little word association?
I'm sorry?
You ready for a little word association?
So you're going to say a word, and I'm supposed to say the first thing that pops into my head?
Yeah, first thing or two. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Okay. Favorite color?
Oh, red, because of Wisconsin.
Okay. If you were in a foxhole, other than any family members, who would you have in the foxhole with you?
At any time in history?
Yeah, anybody. Yep.
I'm a big fan. I was a big fan of the Band of Brothers, so I would probably choose Bill Garnier.
Okay.
Did you watch are you familiar with Band of Brothers?
No, I'm not.
A World War II series that HBO had about this regiment, the 506 Regiment of the 101st Airborne, and it was great. You should watch it. I think you could get it on Amazon Prime now, or HBO even.
I'm writing it down.
Was, What's that?
I'm writing it down. I'm going to watch it. Yes, it was
a terrific series. About 10 episodes, and Dick Winters is kind of the leader of it and kind of the star and the focal point. But one of the really great soldiers, in my opinion, was this guy Bill Garnier, and he, that's who I would have in my foxhole.
Okay.
How about you? Who would you have?
Who, me? I would probably just take like a Navy SEAL, like the top Navy SEAL ever. Whoever that guy is.
Like
name one.
Kyle, What was it? What was the name? I can't remember his name now. I'm blanking.
I can't. Whoever his.
Chris Kyle. Chris Kyle, the American Sniper guy.
Yeah, I bring him in there.
Not a
with me.
bad choice at all there.
Yeah. What's that? Oh, yeah.
Not a bad choice.
Yeah, I'll change it to him or your guy. One of those two I put in.
Another one might be John Basilone, who's from New Jersey, Raritan, New Jersey, won the Medal of Honor, and he was in another HBO series, kind of the Pacific equivalent of Band of Brothers, and it was called The Pacific. Won the Medal of Honor, and he would be another one I'd want in the foxhole with me.
Okay.
He's from not too far from where you are. He's in New Jersey. He was born in New Jersey. Obviously, he's dead, but he's another one I'd want in the foxhole.
Oh yeah, well Raritan's 25 minutes away from me. So I could,
Raritan is 25 minutes away. Really?
About that, probably about that. Yeah, most a half hour. Yeah.
I think there are all kinds of bridges and streets named John Basilone in that town, in that area.
Oh, okay. I'll start noticing it.
Another word association for me?
Okay, now, if you were on the deserted island, which 2 musical CDs would you bring with you? Say you're on this beautiful island for 5 years. I'll let you bring 2 music CDs.
2 music CDs? Man. And I'm there for 5 years?
Yeah, I was going to say forever, but I'll cut it to 5. I got to give you, like you'll be out of there in 5 years. So.
I guess can I cheat and do like a greatest hits?
Yeah.
It's 2 CDs or something.
Sure.
All right, and then like that Beatles greatest hits, that's 2 CDs. So that counts as 1, but as 1.
Okay.
And then for my other one, probably Fleetwood Mac's greatest hits.
Okay. Actually, their one album had a lot of hits on it. Didn't they have that one album like in '77? It had like every song was great. I remember one of those ones.
Oh yeah, their Rumors album.
Yeah, 76. Yeah, 76.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. I remember that. I was 16. Yeah.
I love Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie. She had a different voice than Christine McVie, and it just all meshed so perfectly, in my opinion. One of the greatest groups in history. And
I think that was at the time that one of the best-selling albums. I remember. What was the name of it? I just said it. I think I can't. That famous album in '76, Rumors. I think that was like
Rumors. The album Rumors. Yeah.
Yeah, like 20 million. There's some kind of crazy number it sold. Right? It was up there.
I think Thriller is still the best-selling album of all time. But for a long time, it was Tapestry by Carole King. And then Rumors knocked it off. And then I think Rumors only got knocked off by Michael Jackson's Thriller. And I think Thriller still remains the top-selling LP of all time.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I'm not 100% positive of that, but it's close.
Yeah. I wasn't a big Thriller fan, but I get it, though. He was pretty hot, in 81.
I wasn't a big Thriller fan either, but many people were. Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Casablanca is my favorite movie. That's kind of a predictable answer for many people, but I do love it. Also, Stripes is one of my favorites. I basically have that movie memorized. Stripes was such a great movie. I loved it.
What was your favorite
scene? So Casablanca and Stripes.
Favorite scene in Stripes. What was your favorite scene in Stripes?
When they were doing the marching after they did it, and they do the razzle dazzle and that stuff. That was pretty good. I also like the scene where they go to rescue their comrades in that mobile house or whatever it was called, the RV. And Bill Murray has a great line. They're in Czechoslovakia, and he says, "Czechoslovakia? That's like invading Wisconsin." I thought that was a great line. Having lived in Wisconsin, So right. Casablanca and Stripes are probably my 2 favorites.
Okay.
Drama, comedy.
Favorite actor or actress?
Tom Hanks. I like Tom Hanks a lot. Although I did not like him in Forrest Gump. I thought he overacted in that. But Tom Hanks is my favorite.
He was in a bunch of great movies. I saw some list. It was like so many, especially in that '90s into 2000 run. And they were all great movies.
He did, and he's very versatile because he's done comedies, Sleepless in Seattle, that one with Meg Ryan about the book. You've Got Mail.
Yep.
So he's done comedies. He was in Saving Private Ryan, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13. He's been in so many in a variety of roles, not just drama, not just comedy. He started out as a comedian, and he's turned it into being a fabulous actor. He's my favorite.
And he had that one on the deserted island. So I had that as my hit and miss with you. But where he was deserted on that island when he crashed the plane. What's the name of that movie?
Right.
Remember that movie where he grew the beard and he tried to survive on that island?
Castaway.
That's it. Yeah. I always watched that one.
That was a solo performance. The beginning and the end, you had people, but other than that, it was him and Wilson.
Yeah. That was. I love watching that.
He was also good in Captain Phillips, where he was the captain of that tanker, that big ship that got the pirate seized, Somalia pirates seized in the Indian Ocean. That was a good movie. Captain Phillips. The Terminal, I thought, was good. I'm a big Tom Hanks fan. I think he's come a long way since his early disasters like Joe versus the volcano. But that's to be expected when you're starting out, and you have to prove yourself. And then he got better roles after that.
And my wife just took my son. I want to see it too, to see Toy Story 4, and he's the voice of Woody. I mean, probably the most beloved character in the movie.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
How can I forget Toy Story? Yeah.
And they're all good. From 1 to 4. Usually when you hit 4, like Rocky, they get worse. But that was just as good, if not better, than 1. That's my wife said.
Have you seen Toy Story 4?
No, my wife saw it last night with my son. I'm going to see it like in 2 weeks with him again. I didn't see it.
Okay.
But very, they really enjoyed it. Adults could enjoy that stuff too. Yeah.
I'm thinking of just going myself. Normally I take my daughter to those kind of movies, but I love Toy Stories 1 through 3, and especially 3, which I thought should have won the Academy Award for Best Picture. I do want to see Toy Story 4, even if I have to go by myself.
Well, they're emotional. It's emotional too. They hit some kind of chord in people, and me too. I mean, it's kind of sad, some of these things. Parts of the movie, especially on 3. I think that was at the ending. When the girl comes in.
Oh, the ending.
Yeah. It's
how do you not cry during that?
Exactly. That's why I'm glad it's dark in the movies. Maybe that's why it is. But yeah, that was powerful stuff. All right, favorite president.
I'm sorry?
Your favorite president.
Favorite president? Oh, Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. Okay.
By a wide margin over anybody else. He took over the country at the most serious time in our history. He salvaged the country. He was a man of principle. He was pragmatic as well. And he saved America. A lesser president, if we had Buchanan during those days, the country, we might be 2 different countries. We might have, the Confederacy and the United States. And so Lincoln by a good distance, in my opinion, is the greatest president. He saved the United States.
And it was a great movie too. Like about 4 years ago, there was a great movie about what was it about? It was about that thing, right?
With Daniel Day-Lewis, I think.
Yeah. They said that's just exactly how he was too. The way he sounded and everything. It was, it felt like it was Lincoln.
Right.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, definitely Lincoln, my favorite president. Second favorite, probably Ronald Reagan.
Okay. He was very charismatic too, wasn't he?
What's that?
Charismatic. He seemed like he had a lot of charisma. Reagan.
Oh, he did. Great. Fabulous communicator. Very few can relate to an audience like he did. Maybe it was his acting, although he was, just a mediocre actor, but he was a great communicator.
All right. Ireland. What comes to mind when you hear Ireland?
Say that again?
The country of Ireland. Word association. Back to that. What do you think?
Word association, Ireland.
Yeah.
What comes to mind? Cute girls. A lot of redheaded girls. What else comes to mind? Some Jameson comes to mind. Pretty country, I've heard. Love to go there sometime.
Yeah.
But political division. They've had their historic battles with Britain. But Ireland is I think highly of Ireland. It's a great country.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Okay.
to be there.
Ocean. What do you think we're here? Ocean. The ocean.
The ocean?
Yeah.
What do I think of when I hear the ocean?
Yeah.
Well, God, you got me. I don't know. Pacific?
Okay. Well, that's the first thing that came to your mind.
I do love the Pacific more than the Atlantic. It's just a marvelous coastline up and down California, Oregon, Washington. Just marvelous to look at. You can't really swim in it. There's too many sharks, and it's much colder than the Atlantic.
Yeah, it's always. I think that would be warmer, out west, but it does seem to be cold when you dip your feet in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even south down San Diego way, it's chilly. It's chilly.
What's your favorite ice cream, George?
My favorite
flavor. Ice cream flavor.
I'm sorry. One more time, Ray.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, okay. I like. What's it called? The pecan has butter pecan. Butter pecan.
Oh, okay,
is my favorite.
Okay, that's a little different, away from the chocolate, vanilla, strawberry standard. I like that.
Don't care for strawberry. Chocolate I like. Vanilla I like. Butter pecan is the kind I usually get when I have ice cream.
Other than sports, what's your favorite hobby? Then a couple more and we're done.
Sports, my favorite hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't have too many hobbies these days. I used to have a lot of hobbies. I don't have. I can't think of too many hobbies that I really have now.
Okay.
Sports would be about the only thing that comes to mind. But you excluded sports. I'm not sure I have any.
Okay.
I'm not sure I really do have a hobby.
Okay. All right. Lennon or McCartney? What do you like better?
Lennon.
Okay. Why Lennon?
I think he had more talent, and he was really more the driving force for the success of the Beatles than Paul McCartney. Not to diminish Paul McCartney; he's a great artist, a great singer, but I think Lennon was, kind of the Thurman Munson of the Beatles. He was the straw. He stirred everything. They were all very talented. Even Ringo Starr was talented. George Harrison, immensely talented. But yeah, I think I'd go with.
I like that straw now, yeah, because all the other Beatles seemed to kind of look up to John. You just had that feeling, that he was.
They did. Now, unfortunately, he got involved with Yoko and bye bye Beatles, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had one friend argue that took away from the Lennon legacy because he admired Yoko, and how could he like her music? Like what kind of talent a scout could he have been to like her music? But it was his wife, though, so I got to give him that, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an unusual marriage that they had. I still haven't quite figured it out yet. I don't know if anyone has, but it seems like an odd pairing to me.
Yeah. And the last thing on Len, I always thought that he was that leader, like early on, like he was that guy,
He was the leader.
Yeah.
Most of the songs they're all credited to Lennon McCartney, but Lennon, even those Lennon McCartney songs, Lennon was the driving force for most of those. Just, not to say McCartney did not contribute his share, but I think most of them were driven by Lennon rather than McCartney.
Right. And he looked cooler than the rest of them in Hard Day's Night. He definitely had that cool look going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Best advice that you ever received. Then I got one more.
What's that?
I got two more of these left, George. What's the best advice?
Two more word association?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Best advice you ever received.
Go ahead. The best what?
Advice that you ever received.
Best advice I ever received.
Or what advice would you give? One way or the other. Which would you give to someone that's coming up? Maybe that's going to be a lawyer, or which have you received? Like either one, or both.
Well, it's kind of specific to law. The best advice I received in my career as a prosecutor was to disclose everything. Okay, prosecutors are required to disclose evidence that they have, especially if it's exculpatory and favorable. And there are some exceptions and blah, blah, blah. But the best advice I ever received really as a young prosecutor was to disclose everything. Even if you don't have to disclose it, disclose it. and then you're never going to have a problem getting lit up by a court for prosecutorial misconduct. And you see these happening all the time with what are called Brady violations, where prosecutors are under an obligation to disclose favorable evidence, even if it means hurting their case. They have to disclose it, and prosecutors and courts are really getting PO'd with prosecutors who don't. And so the best advice I ever had is disclose everything and you won't have any problems. Now, there always are exceptions. I wouldn't disclose something if it endangered a witness, or I'd ask the court for protective order, or if it endangered an ongoing investigation, I'd be cautious about that. But for your general case, the way I was a prosecutor, I played with my 5 cards all up. Okay, here are my 5 cards. I think I can beat you. And that's how I played. I did not hide anything. I disclosed everything, and I never got in trouble for it.
Okay. Wow. I love that, because that's what you want to hear. Is there a reward for prosecutors that win cases, or you think that, why wouldn't they be fair? Why do they want to have such an adversarial situation, and not do what you just said?
Well,
did they get rewarded by convictions?
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of promotions are based on the convictions that prosecutors get after trial.
Okay.
It's based on that, and especially in high publicity cases. And DOJ, especially, whether it's a conviction after trial or a plea, they reward prosecutors, the investigators, all the time for their fine efforts in getting a conviction. And so that really can't create a problem, because I've known a lot of prosecutors who were really driven by getting headlines in papers and driven by getting convictions. And I got into a big battle with the prosecutor in Connecticut over this, where she did not want me to disclose something, and I felt I had an obligation to do it, and she still doesn't speak to me to this day, but the evidence was exculpatory, and had to do it. Had to do with DNA, and so I kind of wrecked her case, and eventually this guy got exonerated that she wanted to prosecute. So I kind of feel justified in doing it, but I can't remember. How did we get on this topic anyway?
Best advice you ever received, right? Yeah.
Yeah, disclose. If you're a prosecutor, disclose everything.
Okay, good stuff. And my final hit in this, George, my final word association. Ready? You ready for this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Is if you had to meet anyone in the world tomorrow, I'm a genie. I'm going to grant you the wish. You could meet this person tomorrow throughout history. Who would you meet tomorrow?
Did you say throughout history?
Let's do throughout history. Yeah.
Or okay.
And then I'm going to say anyone that's alive, but you got me going. I want to hear both.
Well,
maybe it is the same
if you're
person.
Talking throughout history, I probably would have to go with Jesus Christ.
Okay.
If you're talking about maybe, although I don't know how I communicate with him because he didn't speak English, but Lincoln would be at the top of my list. I'd love to go to a dinner party with Abe Lincoln and have some chats about a lot of different things. And he was an interesting person to talk to. Just a brilliant person and a great president. So Lincoln would be one of them.
Did you visit?
Talking about.
Okay, about live now. Someone alive. Well, quick, I was going to ask you, did you ever go to Illinois or where he grew up? A friend of mine was a big Lincoln fan. He actually visited where he grew up and where he studied, in a couple places. Did you ever do that?
Lincoln?
Yeah.
No, I did not. I never went to Springfield. He was born in Kentucky, but I took courses in college specifically on Lincoln, and read a lot of books about him, a lot of biographies. There's some great ones, especially by Stephen Oates, who wrote 3 or 4 biographies on Lincoln. And unlike most historians, he's an accomplished writer. So his books read like novels rather than dry history books. So Stephen Oates, his books on Lincoln are magnificent. As far as who I'd like to meet, today, a person who is alive today, I would have to say, are you ready for this?
I'm ready for anything. Yeah. Just don't say Charles Manson or someone like that.
President Trump.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to have a round of golf with him at Mar-a-Lago, and
that would be cool. Yeah, right.
And chat with him on different things. Yeah.
Well,
that's my life.
That's kind of possible too, isn't it? I mean, he's still alive. I mean, it's not too far fetched, I don't think, to have that thing possibly happen.
It could possibly happen, but unlikely.
Yeah. What if you had to ask him a question? What would you ask him? What would you say? Hey, Mr. President.
I'm sorry. What's that?
What question would you ask Donald Trump? Say, okay, you could get one question into him. What would you want to know of him?
Geez, I'm not sure that I would. It would be a question and answer, so to speak, where I'm trying to find out information like, did you collude with Russia or something like that. It would just be more picking his brain because he's on people despise him, of course, and I can understand why. But he's a magnificent salesman, and just his methodology of going about doing things, I find fascinating. Mm-hmm. His tweets are really interesting, and they provoke people, and that's what he wants. He kind of, he's a salesman,
right?
And he's doing everything on his terms. It's not like he has to meet someone. He does something, and people have to respond to him. And how he goes about doing that is fascinating. So it's not necessarily what are you doing on the border or North Korea. It wouldn't be questions like that. It would be more trying to understand how he thinks and how he approaches issues. His mindset when he's approaching an issue, or when he wants to sell something to a country. How does he go about doing that?
I got you. Right. You know what? I hear he's a good golfer too. Like the best golfer for a president.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah, he's a good golfer.
Yeah, I've seen him on the swing. He has a heck of a swing. The way he's like Babe Ruth. The way he drives into that ball. You ever see him do a drive?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, you could get on YouTube. They have him try. It's pretty interesting cut he has. He really gets into it. It's kind of interesting.
No, I haven't played for years. But when I was at my best, I was a hacker.
Yeah.
I would just play for fun.
Right. I'm a hacker myself. One more question, because now you got me going.
Sure.
Who's the most famous person you ever met?
I did shake hands once with President Bush, 41, at a speech he gave in Hartford. I urinated a couple of stalls away from Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh wow, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. They filmed the movie that he was in, Back to School, at the University of Wisconsin when I was in law school there. And so I'm at the law school in the urinal, and then Rodney Dangerfield comes in, and you never how the code is. You don't go to the urinal next to somebody, you go one away.
Right.
So anyway, I'm leaving, and I said, "You're Rodney Dangerfield," and he says to me, "I'd shake your hand, kid, but I'm using it." And so he was
funny,
he was
right
on
in
his
there.
Game.
Yeah.
He was right on his game. So Rodney Dangerfield was, aside from President Bush, Rodney Dangerfield I think is the most famous. And when I was in radio, I met a fair number of celebrities. They would stop by radio stations I was at. Ann and Nancy Wilson from Heart. I can't even remember the others. Barry Manilow. I did an interview with him. Right. Don't ever ask Barry Manilow a question about baseball. I interviewed him during the '82 World Series. I was working in Milwaukee, and I said, "So who do you like in the World Series?" And he's doing a concert like the next day in Milwaukee, and he had no clue. He goes to Milwaukee and he has no clue that the Brewers are in the World Series.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Be a little better prepared than that,
Yeah, right. Even fake it, or just just look at the newspaper a little. That's funny. Barry Manilow. Hey, he had some big hits. I like Barry. Mandy and New Weekend in New England. He had that 1970s run.
Big hit.
He had that run.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Copacabana. Yeah. Yeah, he looked a little weird when he got older. He had that little strange look to him as he got older a little.
Yeah, he hasn't really done well. He's obviously up there, so I imagine his voice is kind of faded. But he was obviously very popular in the 70s and 80s, and but he comes to Milwaukee and doesn't know that the Brewers are in the '82 World Series.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good.
You would think, because the biggest applause, as you know, you've been to concerts. The biggest applause you ever get is when they say the hometown. Okay,
right.
It's great to be here, Newark, or it's great to be here, New York, and of course that's the biggest. It's great to be here, Phoenix.
That's the biggest applause line, right?
Yeah. So what was Barry going to say? It's great to be here. I don't know where I am. I'm not in Milwaukee. Or, you think he would throw out one of those lines just to get some cheap applause about the Brewers in the World Series. Yeah.
Right, or his manager just said, "Hey, the Brewers in the World Series, Barry. Just so you know, you might want to mention that, or someone say
exactly.
Something like that." Yeah.
Exactly. Who's prepping this guy?
Oh, that's funny. Hey, George, I'd like to have you on again. There's a couple. We didn't talk about football, a couple other sports. We didn't talk about those other, a couple of other things.
We covered it. We covered a good amount of ground, but yeah, we still got some more to go.
Yeah, this might be a 3-parter. This was good.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm up.
I appreciate you coming out. Enjoy the. What time are you there? You're good. You're. What?
I don't even know. What time is it?
Give me your typical day. I mean, you're retired now. What does George Ferko do?
I'm retired.
You just do anything?
And I also have some health issues. I'm diabetic, and I really haven't been able to get that under control. So I seem to be drowsy all the time, and my sleep schedule is off, and so I usually wind up not going to bed to sleep until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, our time, which is Pacific time. And then waking up about noon.
Oh, okay.
And then, I'll do some. I try to walk every day, although it's tough to do this time of year in the middle of the day. To try and control my diabetes a little bit, try and get some exercise in. But I work on some things, some projects that I'm doing that I've been putting off for a while. Writing some things, working on some. Law articles that I'm trying to, I hope to have published some in some law reviews. So I'm kind of doing that kind of stuff, and that's about it.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So that's a deal. So we'll have you back on. We'll have a lot more fun, maybe in a couple of weeks. And that was George Ferko. I'm Ray K. We'll catch you next time.